And welcome. I'm Ted Stoddard of Turner Lane and chairman of the Elections and Ethics Committee, and which consists of Frank Carell and Steve Troen. Frank is out in the hall. And I want to welcome you to the 2015 Candidates Forum for Martin's Edition. The purpose of the forum is to allow village residents a chance to learn more about the candidates and what they hope to accomplish if elected to the council. Statements from each have already been published in the newsletter, online, and in the media. They're also here. To do this, I'll call on each candidate in alphabetical order and allow each of them up to 3 minutes, timed by to express their ideas about serving on the council. I'm doing this because we have a limited amount of time to cover our candidates. After that, I will open the meeting for questions from out there, from all of you. If you're shy about using a microphone, we have cards here where you can write out your questions and I'll read them for you. You may direct your question to an individual or to the group as a whole. But if you question an individual, I will allow responses from all the other candidates. We will adjourn at 8:30 to make way for the regular village council meeting. Now, we will introduce the candidates one by one. In alphabetical order, John Fleming. Would you like to say something for 3 minutes?
Oh, yes, I do. I'm running for what I hope will be my second term on the village council. And during my first term, I concentrated on learning the village business, what are the major issues facing us, and led the effort to hire 2 Montgomery County police officers to serve as part-time police for Martin's Editions. By establishing a police presence in the village, we have joined our police with those in the village and town of Chevy Chase, plus Chevy Chase View to our north and our other communities. Martin's Edition is a small, tiny jurisdiction. Nevertheless, we receive excellent services. This is due to excellent management. Our services happen on schedule, and that happens not because our contractors are benevolent souls. It happens because our village management is competent and persistent on a daily basis. And I really can't emphasize how critical that is to the community that we have now. I've lived here well over 40 years, and it is a well-managed community. The village faces substantial rebuilding of our infrastructure. It's over 100 years old, or some of it's up to 100 years old. Our sidewalks are crumbling, our streets are breaking up, our telephone poles are being replaced, our water line, our utility lines are all being dug up and replaced. This is tearing up our streets, and until that work is done, we will not be able to pave and rebuild our streets. Unfortunately, this administration and the past had a wise policy of banking our surpluses, which are substantial. And we do have a sufficient sum, I hope, to be able to cover all the substantial work, and it is substantial, that needs doing to basically rebuild this community. It's almost 100 years old, and it has not been restructured in 50 years or more in the time that I've been here. We do need a lot of work. There's not much controversy over those needs. They are clear. Controversy comes when the village seeks to attain good ends, but by means which inevitably could limit residents' financial returns on our homes. And these issues include trees, the regulating the design of new homes in size and appearance, water drainage from one private property to another private property that under our law is not the village business, but it affects the village. And in the short run, limitations on private property rights may have negative results. But in my view, the most effective immediate steps the village can take will be to subsidize private, self-restraining positive acts.
Thank you, John, very much. Our next speaker is Katya Hill.
Hi, my name is Katya Hill, and I am running for the Village Council. Ever since I started coming to the Village Council meetings, I realized how much work and dedication from just a few village residents goes into running our beloved village. It is wonderful to see how many people are actually interested in our village operations. And let me tell you, I love living in our village. I've lived around here within a mile or two of our house for the last 22 years. I went to BCC and stayed on around here until now. My husband and I bought our house just a couple of blocks away from where he grew up. And really, I cannot imagine living anywhere else. So to help keep the village as wonderful as it is today, and maybe even make it better, I decided to volunteer my own time and energy to run for the Village Council. I am running actually together with Richard, and I am hoping that my experience and Richard's experience together will be a good blend and will be able to deliver some significant benefits to the village. I'm not on the council now, so let me tell you a little bit about my experience. I believe that my corporate experience is absolutely relevant to the village operations. I work for Fannie Mae. And not only am I used to dealing with budgets and contracts and competing priorities, I mainly concentrate on strategic initiatives for the company. So one of the initiatives I'm currently working on is Simplify. So this is us looking at our organization overall and determining ways to make our extremely complex operations simpler. Now, I believe that our village could benefit from a similar analysis. Over the last several years, the village operations have gotten more complex, contracts have gotten more complex, so I think we could really benefit from something like that overall and from my expertise in this area. Furthermore, I am heading a team that is responsible for triggering disaster response in case of an unfortunate case of disaster. So this team was started after Hurricane Katrina, and we are now responsible for putting our processes in place in case something like that happens. So what I'm trying to say is I am used to dealing with major responsibility, and I appreciate your support, and I hope you will support us on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Katya. Our next speaker is Katie Howard.
Katie, could you hold on 1 second?
Yes.
Since Katya spoke so fast, we need to... There's no reset button on there.
You got to move into the digital world. Wow, look at that.
Here we are. Thank you. Back up.
Okay. We can get to the new digital right now.
Well, I'm Katie Filipchek Howard. I reside at 3510 Taylor Street, along with my husband, Steve, and my two daughters, Hannah and Heidi. As some of you, or many of you might have read in the candidate statements, I grew up in Martin's Addition, moved here when I was 5 years old, with my parents, Ben and Jill Filipchek. My mom, my parents were residents since 1980. And my mom served on the village council for 3 years and in several capacities for Martin's Addition. We're both humbled, and I appreciate standing under her name today. And I'd like to carry on her legacy. I think of my mom on a daily basis. Just today, I took my two daughters to a Take Your Daughter and Sons to Work Day event at WTOP.com, where I currently work as a digital news editor. And I thought of my mom because she organized countless events like that at her government agency, at GSA, and other agencies where she served. lots of opportunities and events for children to get involved. And I thought about that, and now she would say, if you all know my mom, she would say, okay, enough about me, tell them about you and why they're here, because that's how my mom was. I think my professional background, the fact that I grew up in Martin's Addition, and a recent situation as a resident that my family and I went through because of a building project really gives me a unique vantage point as a candidate. And may I use props? Can I? Okay, all right. So I have a communications background. I've been a digital news editor for WTOP, USAtoday.com. I started as a reporter covering Capitol Hill. My beat was federal workers' compensation claims, if anybody wants to yawn. So I know a lot about legalese and gobbledygook. And sometimes when you're a resident, yes, we received the plans, yes, we were informed of the meetings, yes, we had opportunities, but until you're really personally affected by a building project, I just feel there could be better relations, and I, for one, would like to be the one to do that, because now I know who you need to contact in the county when situations arise. Here's the problem. So as I said, I live at 3510 Taylor. There was a project on 3511 Turner Lane. Fast forward, it is a happy ending in the end. A beautiful, wonderful new family moved in, but up until that point, it was a nightmare, and it affected 4 different households. We received plans of a retaining wall. And we were in favor of it. Our retaining wall was aging, and we supported it. Our next door neighbor, they were impacted because of landscaping. They had to tear landscaping down. And then the Turner Lane neighbors were also affected. How I was affected was the runoff from Turner Lane. So
Katie, I'm going to have to interrupt you. You can carry on a little bit
you
more
can just
later.
pass them around.
But your 3 minutes
Okay.
are up. Thank you very, very much. Finish?
Is it? Okay. Anyway, as you'll see from the pictures, there is the builder said to just let him do his work. He was very dismissive, and we just had to live through it. And then until when we had one deluge after another, I learned how to contact the appropriate county officials, and that county official, I don't want to name names, but was the one that actually helped us and stopped the project and made the builder, gave him repercussions, and he did, help us so we wouldn't experience this flooding, which affected us and it affected the rest of Taylor Street. And I don't want to see another resident have to go through the situation we did. When we met with the builder, I don't want to say the name publicly, but a pair of residents who've lived here since the 1960s. He didn't care how we were affected, and this could happen again. And matters worse, then we get this thing in the mail from him saying, "Oh, can I just knock your house down so I can build another one of my houses?" This is going to keep
Katie, please.
continuing, and I would like to help residents deal with this.
Okay, thank you very much. Richard Kajak.
Hi. My wife Anita DeFanis and I have lived here for 36 years. We moved into this neighborhood when we were almost the youngest on our block and are now the oldest on our block. But it's exciting because we now have young families with children. We have the noise that goes with that sort of change, and it's wonderful to have so many young people. I met Katya, who was talking about running for council, and she's so infectious, and I thought her experiences and my experiences mesh so much that I could just see that the two of us running together would really be a good team, and so I decided to run for council again. I don't bring, well, you all know me. I was on the council for 7 years. There are no surprises, but I am very happy to be thinking about coming back and hope that you would vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Bill Nevich, please.
20 years ago, Debbie Metzger recruited me to work on a committee to deal with buildings. It was approved by the council, but it never went anywhere. And then 5 years ago, we did have a committee that was able to implement building standards. And I continue to be interested in those issues, specifically unresolved issues like stormwater, which requires something beyond Martin's Addition. It requires cooperation with the neighboring communities and with the county and perhaps even the state. And those are the primary objectives of my campaign for re-election.
Thank you very much, Bill. Finally, Mark Wiener.
Thank you, Ted.
Hold on. Everybody's talking
I'll just
too
take
fast.
my colleague's time. Since we're running ahead.
I'll ask
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Wiener, and my wife, Alex, who's in the front row here, and I, and our 3 boys, moved to Martin's Addition on Thornapple Street about 9 years ago in 2006. Though not as long as the years and years I have up here in terms of my fellow candidates, I think 9 years I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how wonderful living in a small village can be. And I think about the services in our community, from the side yard trash pickup when some of my other neighbors don't have that, and how frequently our streets are plowed in the winter when even sometimes the main road here isn't plowed as quickly. Those are wonderful things. I also know that we can do better. In my 9 years here, and in my really 25 plus years in the corporate environment, coming from experience most recently with WNS Global Services, and prior to that with Travelocity and Sabre and American Airlines, I've learned a lot about governing at least in a corporate environment. My roles from finance to planning to operations and most recently sales, I've experienced a variety of different things. I've also served on a variety of committees and councils over the years, some in the corporate environment. I was active on the Choice Hotels Owners Council in representing our company with our franchisee owners, about 5,000 of them, in fact, in the U.S. I've also served on homeowners associations. When I lived in Texas, I was the treasurer of our homeowners association, and even here with Ted and Frank, a year on the elections and ethics committee here before I resigned in order to run for council. So I've experienced a lot. I pledged to bring that experience to the village by specifically working to enable a higher level of respect and openness in our community. In my statement, hopefully you all read, I gave some examples of what I mean. Specifically, standing research and policy committees in which every member of the council would actively participate. An annual survey of our residents to tap into the voice of our community for people who aren't as active as all of you. I mean, we have 320-something homes. They're not all here, and they have a voice, and it's important that we recognize what they have to say. Personally, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the council manager form of government. It works for large cities, it works for small cities. I think to be successful, though, we have to be very clear as a council on what we stand for. For me, that's a short list. Public safety, transparency, preservation and strengthening of our property values, consistent delivery of village services, and preserving our village character and quality and way of life. That's what I stand for. I've got nothing to hide. Every decision I would make as a council member was going to be with those things in mind. And personally, with respect to execution of our various civic responsibilities, the manager's job is to take our lead as council. Council sets the long-term vision. Our professional manager, her job is to execute that faithfully. And my job is to ensure that I'm listening well to everyone in the community. It's a balance in fiscal responsibility and excellent service. For me, it's not necessarily the cheapest solution, it's the value-oriented solution. That's what I believe, and that's what I believe is going to be best for all of us, but I'm here to listen, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Now, we have about an hour and 5 minutes to handle questions.
Excuse me, Ted.
Yes.
We have a microphone. You can hand out questions. But anyone who would prefer to submit their question in writing, we have some little index cards. They're welcome to fill them out. And born out of Baskin. I would ask that everyone who does submit such questions, please indicate their name and the street where they live. Thank you.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. You have a question?
No, I guess.
All right.
Was that-
Hands. Raise your hands. Somebody ask a question. Sir, your name, please, and street.
Jeffrey, Michael Goldberg. I live on Oxford Street. Oxford and Primrose have water runoff problems. My neighbors, in cooperation each with one another, have spent over $45,000 doing redraining and for water runoff. Specifically, where do we touch the county to indicate that we have a problem with drainage, and what time frame are we looking at?
Okay.
Anybody on the council?
Okay. Anybody?
I have 2 contacts for you. I can give you their information.
Please.
Derek, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, and Jim Sackett. They are a division of Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services, Division of Land Development, Sediment Control, and Stormwater Management. I'll give you their emails and their
Please.
contact information.
Anybody else wants to comment?
We have talked with the
Right,
county.
Right. And Bill, what have we found?
Sympathy but no action, and that's why I'm running again, to implement something, to lean on them.
Well, what specifically, how can we exert any muscle? What specific ways can the community do?
Support the elected officials, support the government as we push forward.
Do we need a petition? What do we need?
Nothing right now. I would just give us some time to build the relationship and then come at them with a large number of people and a petition and specific recommendations for action.
Okay. Another question, please. Somebody raise your hand. Lisa.
Alyssa Bean, Turner Lane. It's my understanding that we have a surplus in our budget, and I was just curious what your thoughts were as far as how we will use that in the future, or what we might be saving it for.
Is that a general question?
As I think as I said in our statement, my statement, our surplus is substantial. It's over $2 million. Well over half of that is budgeted tentatively for the street replacement, sidewalk replacement, and street lights. Now that's just a blind flying guess in the dark as to what it really will cost. Our tax rate for income tax is really set by the county. There's just statutorily, as I understand it, there's just so far we can go down, and we're just about at the bottom level of that. We have in this village, everybody thinks they're well paid, but we have less than the people on 5 fingers who pay 40% of our income tax revenues. That shows you how vulnerable we are to the ups and downs of the market, or to entrepreneurs, or people's their personal income. We have no control over that. We have a property tax rate which is really pretty low, and collects maybe about $145,000 out of a budget that's around $800,000. But you could say we have total discretion over that. We could eliminate it, and as I understand, in the past it was eliminated and then it was restored. My view is that given the extraordinary expenses we face in replacing our streets, our sidewalks, everything that's going on in the community today, we're in a situation where we would be foolish to cut taxes right now and then wind up having to raise them all over again.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that we would cut taxes. I'm just wondering, though, if In other words, it's in our best interest at this time to be careful with how we spend it because we're at a
We do spend carefully. Sometimes I think too carefully,
What I
but we
meant was
spend
just if
carefully.
there were like ideas floating around, for example, the Metzgers who moved out have a lot behind our property that some of the neighbors on our street have been talking about, throwing around some ideas about possibly trying to purchase that lot and maybe make it turn into
the
like a community
Metzger's lot.
garden or something.
Like a community, yeah.
So, you know,
It's
just one.
very interesting question. I think, to echo what John was saying, I think to be fiscally responsible is to look forward. Having a surplus can be good or bad. If you have too much of a surplus, I think it perhaps raises the attention of the county if they want to try to come after some of that money through adjusting the amount of income tax revenue that we get. As John mentioned, income taxes, which granted are just a few people that make most of the money, represent something like 80% or 70%, like 70% of our overall revenue. So highly dependent on that. The tax rate that we control on property tax is actually only like 17% of our budget, and it's already sort of on the low end. It's like 4 cents or 4.5 cents per 100 value, and I think, I think we have to have a minimum, John. I was looking at the charter.
We don't have to.
Oh, okay. I got the sense from the charter that it had to be at least 2 cents, but no more than 75 cents or something like that. But regardless, to have the surplus to pay almost like a rainy day fund, in this case, the sidewalks and the other capital investment, and more importantly, as John said, to kind of ward off the risk that we fall into a deficit because some of the wealthy folks that are driving a lot of that income tax revenue move out. And that would not be very wise.
We've seen that before when the recession started, was that our income fell really, really abruptly by over 50% because so much of that income tax money comes from investments, from capital gains tax is all part of it. And so our income was really hurt. This budget surplus with the street lights, the sidewalks, and the repaving of streets, I think is going to use up a significant amount of that money. And it has to be done. I think that, as John said, that those repairs have to be made in order to help the infrastructure. But I think the surplus is high enough now that the council can proceed with that. The village needs to proceed with that.
And I would like to build a little bit on what Richard is saying too, is that the values that both Richard and I strongly believe in is that we really should be practical and inclusive, so the village residents should be included in the decisions that are made about these major projects. So just like the building codes, which was a huge win under Richard's time on the council, right? They reached a compromise that was incredible and was high involvement from the village residents, and I think that the village residents really do benefit when they are involved and in tune. So when we're looking at these major projects, right, we should have focus groups, which should have as much feedback from the residents as possible. And we really need to get these things right. So, like the street lights are very important, and they're important not just to replace them, right? They can't be too bright because we don't want bedrooms lit up in the middle of the night. We can't have them too dim because it's just going to be unsafe. So to get to the right answers, I think that because we work on the village council works to represent the village residents, right? We should have as much involvement as possible to guide us.
Thank you, Katya. Another question from the audience. Yes, Maria.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. How do you plan on doing the focus group? Because I know from helping out at in this office, there's always somebody unhappy. The tree that whose roots are being affected by the neighbor, you know, they're unhappy about that. The person that's building the addition is unhappy because somebody's complaining. They don't want to pay an architect to redraw it just for the tree. They both have arborists that are on their side. So I'm just wondering, when you say focus groups, how are you going to get that many people involved? Because, you know, they're not all going to be happy.
Right. Richard, would you like to take that?
Yeah, but I think the example of that was when we did the building codes, was to bring people onto a task force that both supported getting strong building codes in order to reduce mansionization, but also we had people who opposed that, who brought to the table different views and let us work through an effective compromise. And I think we've done a good job with that. I think the team of people that worked on this listened to residents, and that we have a building code that satisfies a lot of the people in our community.
Well, I'd just like to say that a building code is a piece of legislation. That's a decision that does require input from lots of points of view. Paving a street is not. You either pave it or you don't pave it. You either build a sidewalk or you don't build a sidewalk. And whether you do that may be a legislative decision. That is, people can say, I don't want a sidewalk. But the fact of the matter is that the one issue where I think there's a room for citizen direct involvement is on street lighting, because that's something that affects everybody, and it's new, and it lends itself to a decision like that. You either have the street lights or you don't have them, but you can decide collectively what kind of street lighting you're going to have. Basically, the paving is a technical job. You pave it or you don't pave it.
I read somewhere one of the candidates had an idea where each council member would become like an expert in a certain field.
Yeah, I believe that was my statement.
And I think, just something as simple as streetlights, you already have, and there's nothing wrong with either viewpoint. Some people think it's too dim and unsafe and causes crime. Some people are very concerned about the light pollution, okay? And there's a lot to streetlights, as crazy as that sounds. It sounds like you just can't throw streetlights at somebody that doesn't really understand how, a municipal item like that works. It's, are you going to have the expertise within your council like I thought the idea?
Yeah, so let me explain my idea. And first, on behalf of everyone, I don't think we're all experts in everything. I think we all have passions, but what's most important is, and I appreciate the use of the concept of focus groups or task forces, I think it's broader than that. I think it is a regular standing set of committees in which each council member is responsible to solicit regularly the feedback from the community. It's not fighting fires or today's issue. These things happen regularly, and we need to have a way, a process through which the community can participate in the debate and the development of long-term policies around core buckets of civic areas that we care about. For me, it's a simple list: public safety, finance and land use. So when we talk about how we spend our budget, or do we want to evolve our permitting standards, we want to be talking every month, having an opportunity for the community to get involved. Environment would include the storm water concepts, public works and services, and of course, communication and feedback. I think we could do a better job. I think the village sends a lot of stuff out to us, but I think the relationship between the community and the group of people that are on the council, and the relationship between the council and the manager, I think we could do a better job with that.
I just want to build on what Mark said, and also make the point, Maria, that we do have a consultant on lighting to help us evaluate lighting. But the original council had individual responsibilities for members, and that's something that I strongly support also.
Yeah, Bill and I and John, I think we all agree on that. Yeah.
I probably not quite as much as that.
John will have a
It's your
committee
privilege.
that's smaller.
Yes. Another question from the community. Yes, sir. Back.
Hi, Henry Gavin, Thornapple Street. A minute ago, I heard a comment from I believe the current treasurer that the estimates for this $1 million expense are a blind guess in the dark. Does anyone up there have experience actually estimating large capital expenditures?
I don't have any experience estimating large capital expenditures, but the council, present and past, consults with experts who have given us estimates on what this will cost.
But to the idea
These are
of
not
people
just blind
in
ones.
Council being adept at the area
Pardon?
they focus, I would hope that you would have the experience and background in estimating large capital.
Well, if you want to hire an electrical street engineer, go ahead.
I'm just asking a question.
No, I think that
You have no experience in estimating.
I have no estimating
You're the
experience.
treasurer and you're allocating $1 million of our money.
I'm not allocating the money. I am simply reporting on what the money is, and the council votes what it wants to do.
Does anyone else have experience in this area? On this committee, on this council?
So I have experience with budgeting for major projects in a corporate world, right? So it's not exactly the same, but, you know, we do budget based on the process for that we expect to incur during the project, and some contingency planning. And I'm used to working with budgets that are well over $1 million.
Right, and I worked in budgets that where we spend about $25 million a year, and I know how to budget that, how to get resources when I don't have the information, so that I'm educated and make not a guess, but have a plan before there's a decision.
And my concern comes because I see the forecast budgets every year.
Right.
And then the adjusted to actual budgets every year. And you see probably 8 to 10 line items, which end up being 50 to 100% over what they were going to be. And that becomes reality for next year's budget. So I just want to make sure that we spend our money judiciously and not just overrun every time.
I also would like to add on the issue of budget. You know, I think it goes back to communication. I just think the residents just would appreciate more communication instead of a spreadsheet of a breakdown. Just words. Why are we allocating this? Why do we streamline this? And I'm for that. So.
Yes, back there.
Marty Langley, Chestnut Street. Along the same lines on budget issues, I'm concerned because the village seems to have had for a number of years some no-bid contracts, and I'm not sure what we're paying for on some of these. I would like to ask each of the candidates to publicly commit tonight to, yes or no, whether you would review the current contracts that the village has for services of all kinds. Is that something that each of you could address, please? A thorough review of our current contract.
I would commit to doing that.
I would.
I would commit to do that.
I would absolutely commit to that.
Yes. I think it's really important. I think we have to have a threshold, because I think the relationship between the council and a professional manager, there is some judgment that is put on the manager. So I can't sit here and tell you if we have a $100 contract, but that's what I'm explaining, not your $10,000 professional services contract.
Where would you put the threshold?
I believe in our charter, or our charter for the city, it says everything above $10,000 for professional services must be bid out.
If there are questions about contracts below that level, would you look at them?
I most definitely would. If there are questions that, again, to my point about having a finance committee in which the public can participate, if there are areas of concern, I most definitely, if I'm on that committee, I most definitely will take that up.
And how would you ensure that the citizens felt capable of coming forward and being heard as opposed to just being ignored?
Part of it is just getting the word out. It goes back to communication. I mean, it's a very small community. We have like 14 streets or something like that. Walk the streets. I know Bill and I walk the streets, and we will in the next few weeks as we campaign. But it's just a matter of getting the word out and letting people know that we want their voice heard. And to be able to...
That's good to hear, but in the past, some of us, including me, have been told point blank that the village council and the village administration has no obligation to answer residents' questions. So I would like to ask each of you, do you feel that you have an obligation to answer residents' questions?
I'll start, and I think whoever would have said that, that's ridiculous. And I think it is our obligation to not just listen, but solicit the voice. And this is a small portion of our community here. I want to also hear from people who aren't here. This empty chair, that's important to me as well.
Would you support a survey?
Yeah, it's in my statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear the rest of you, please, on those two questions?
Yeah, I think we need to create an environment that people are comfortable in to ask questions and to question what the council is doing. That there has to be an environment of openness. And that's what I think would help you, it would help all of our citizens feel more comfortable about coming forward with complaints.
So Richard and I actually discussed this before, that we pledge to answer every question that comes from the village residents, because our job would be to represent the village residents on the village council. Right, and that would be our
That's an
primary.
admirable statement, and I endorse that too, because it is our job to respond to whatever the village residents complain about. And when I've heard, and I don't hear very many complaints from village residents, people are not forthcoming. But when they are, we will respond. I will respond.
So interestingly, I actually have heard a number of village residents voice their concerns that the environment in the way that the village office is run today could be a healthier atmosphere. So we would like to.
I would also like to say
I'd like
that
to know
the
what those
people...
are. I'd like to know what those complaints are, because there's a vague vapor of complaints, but there's nothing specific. I'd like to know what they are from you.
So you would like to hear examples?
Yes, specific examples.
So there have been a number of, actually quite
That's not
similar,
specific. That's not specific. A number.
complaints about people's interactions with the village office. And I believe that while this is absolutely not a evaluation of the way that the office is run, the job of the village council is to manage the office staff, and I believe that good staff thrive on good management.
I agree, but you didn't answer my question. What's the complaints?
Actually, I did answer your question, because I said that this...
No, you didn't. You didn't.
This forum is not about the operations of the village office. It is about the...
You brought it up. You brought it up. It's not the place. I agree with you, but you brought it up.
Let's bring it back to something that's interesting.
Right.
Oh, let's bring it back now that you threw it out there. Let's bring it back.
Wait. Excuse me, your attention, please.
I'm Althea Harlan on Raymond Street, and I've been on the village council, I've been the village chair, and I think it's really important that in this village we have respect for one another and civility. So I would like to hear more of that.
Thank you.
You didn't answer the question.
Hi, I'm Johnny Churro on Chestnut Street, and to answer your question, I'm still waiting for a response from one of the council members from 2 years ago on a letter that I addressed to the council president at the time. I'm still waiting for a response from 2 years ago. So, where's the communication then?
My wife's waiting for a response on an email she sent. She's not here.
Ted? Yes, all right. Ernie.
My name is Ernst Liebman. I live on Sonoapple Street, and I've lived there for 28 years. And I lived in Section 3 since 1962. And all the time that I have lived and watched the government going around here, no one, to my knowledge, has ever, or none of the councils, has ever filed an injunction suit against a builder who is blatantly violating his certificate and figures whatever he's doing wrong, whatever fine comes up, it's a cost to doing business. I'm prejudiced. I'm a litigator. And I'm retired. But I would think if you get I'd like to hear your views on this. If you get an egregious case, instead of pussyfooting around, file an injunction suit once. Make it an example, because a builder does not want to get tied up. It costs a lot of money. And so, anyhow, that's my bias. I'd like to hear what you think about this. I'd like to see it happen.
I came close to doing so. And unfortunately, again, because I felt like there wasn't enough. So at the time of the building on Turner Lane that affected my home on Taylor Street, and dealing with that builder, moving home again was a very bittersweet time. My father had lived there for over 30 years. We just lost my mother to cancer. And it was a situation out of control for us. And dealing with this builder just reopened the wounds. And it was just a very emotional, delicate time. And to make a long story short, because we were in that situation, he actually was in his rights with that wall. When he built this wall that started the runoff, he started the building, we went away for 1 week, he completed it, we came back and there was a gaping hole 3 feet wide, so it was the wall ended where we had always had a wall, the old existing wall. And the reason why is we had to go through the county and we found, our plot of land, which is this strange plot that is like an L shape from 1904. And these are the things that we learned on our own. So he wasn't within his rights. And then we had this gaping hole and, so looming lawsuits, flooding, construction, household, it just piled up, and so litigation wasn't the way to go. It sounds like a good way to go, but these things are going to happen again. These cases are going to happen because these builders are going to come in, and you'll go to the county and you'll learn that what you thought were your rights perhaps aren't, and I can help you with that.
The village has the ability to do stop work orders, and they have done that in places already.
Well, I didn't get one, so. Didn't stop for me.
Wait, he just asked if they don't stop, what do you do?
You have to do it on your own.
Yeah, I believe the village as an entity has the right to sue or be sued. Right. So the point that I was making about council participation in committees that have governance over all of these issues. It could be building permits, it could be water runoff, whatever the voice of the community is telling us, we have a responsibility to use everything in our power. That's where a professional manager is going to help advise us, or our attorney, wherever he is back here, will help advise us to be able to represent our community. Probably have more leverage than you might as an individual if it makes sense to file an injunction or whatever it may be. But we have that ability as an entity of a village, and I would recommend we exercise that if somebody's in violation.
I second that.
Any more comments? Jack?
Yeah, I'm Jack Hill, I live on Raymond Street. I'm just going to ask a very general question. I've heard pieces of this from some of you, but what do you all believe is the primary responsibility of a council member in this organization? So,
Well, I'm a new
I'll say,
voice.
quite frankly, I think the primary responsibility of a council member is to oversee the village management and make sure it's competent, that services are being delivered, and that we are responsive to the citizens of the community. And it's that simple.
100% agree. When council develops and creates a vision, long-term vision for the success of our community, the council openly solicits feedback from the community, and as John said, ensures that our professional manager executes relative to the codes and the policies that we establish as government.
I think the council has the responsibility to set the priorities, to make a budget, pass that budget, and then make sure that the village lives within that budget and reports back to the citizens on a regular basis.
I think it is extremely important to represent the voice of the village residents, right? So it would be the job to communicate with the village residents and make sure that the communication channels are always open. And secondly, the job of the village council is to manage the village office staff and course, good employees are even better with good management.
I would start by saying, first of all, I think this job, like anything in politics, I mean, you can make all of the people happy some of the time, some of the people happy all the time. You can't make everyone happy all of the time. And I first would like to thank the existing council members and Jean for their years of service. It is a tough job, but it does not mean there's not room for improvement. And I think if you get some new perspective on the council would help. And listening more to residents, and I really do like Mark's idea of the subcommittee format. I think that you're truly onto something on that, and you know, I'm all for a residential relations committee. I would like to spearhead that.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jorge Solis. I live on Taylor Street. I have a question for Richard. You keep saying that you're running as a team. I'm sorry, what does that mean?
That means that we really share a lot of the same ideas and values, and we think it would be really great if we could both be elected. That's what it means.
Molly?
2 for 1.
Did you have something?
It doesn't mean that you're always going to vote alike.
No, not necessarily.
Can't guarantee it.
But we do share the same values, and I think it's very important. So we met and discussed and agreed that we would like to see the village move in the same direction and work on issues in the same way.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris.
And Richard, what are those values? Chris Fleming.
Transparency, accountability, and respect are the main values that Richard and I share. We believe that the village needs to be more transparent. We need to communicate better with the village residents. We need to ensure accountability, and we need to bring back respect to make the village just, you know, a more
humane, more humane,
harmonious place to live. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Where is the respect? What is the problem? You don't feel that the council members, current council members, have respect for the village?
We believe that in the way that the village residents interact with the village office and the village council, right, members, there should always be respectful interactions, right? We live in a very small community. We want it to be as harmonious as possible, right? There shouldn't be room for
disagreement
or you know,
without there being, again, I think the goal here is that there be transparency and a voice for everyone. And that is part of what respect is, that regardless of your view, that you should be listened to.
So how would you keep saying transparency,
Maria.
how exactly would that be implemented? When you say, is it just every decision? Because we get a newsletter, and I think that this village actually puts out a lot of information, and you have meetings, and the budgets are posted. There's a lot of information that people get. I just don't think they all read it. But I just don't understand give me an example how you're going to be, what you see going forward, how you would implement this transparency.
I think that Mark has talked about one way would be through committee structure would be to see if we could involve more residents. And having been on the council, I know how hard that is to do.
That's not transparency, though.
It is transparency if you get more people involved so that they understand what the process is, what the problems are, what the possible solutions are, and participate in that as decision making. That's transparency.
Okay, for me, transparency is that you feel like you're not getting enough information from an office or from somebody else, and you feel like the process is not transparent. So you're talking about involvement. So I'm just a little confused whenever I've heard transparency so many times, what your actual vision of that is.
Right.
So we've heard from that some people would like, and this is something that came up in the council meetings, right? So that are open to the public. I've heard the same question asked several times, if people would like to know more information on our contracts, right?
It just happened at our last meeting with the Voting and Ethics Committee that was behind closed doors. That just happened in our most recent meeting with the Voting and Ethics Committee, where the and with all due respect to Stephen, but I mean, he was appointed behind closed doors, and that's exactly the kind of transparency that I would, for one, like to see.
And I was opposed to going into closed session.
Personally, I think it was inappropriate.
So what is the transparency you wish to see with contracts? You want to see the actual contract? Is that it, or?
Well, I think that the village residents would probably deserve to know, like, are these contracts, were they bid out, right? What were the options, right? What are the values of these contracts? I think there's actually some confusion. There's general buckets.
Put out, isn't it?
Pardon?
Isn't that already available?
No, it's not.
You cannot find the aggregate professional services contract value, and I don't know if people ask that question. There's no way to find out.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
There's no way to find out the aggregate contract value.
Can I just interrupt 1 second? Anybody people who've already spoken, sorry, if you just reiterate your name and who's your address.
So for those, I was one of the people who have been raising the questions about contracts, and there's no way to find out the aggregate contract.
Will you please?
Pendergast, Thorn Apple Street, I'm sorry, Steve.
Thank you.
Aggregate contract value of some of these firms providing services, who may be providing more than $10,000 in services, but it's on a sole source by sole source basis. And I'd like us to start to understand who these people are who are getting this non-competitive award. That on an individual basis, by contract, are less than 10 grand, but may exceed 10 grand in their annual expenditures, or their multi-year expenditures. So just to let you know, I don't know if you like that question, but I'm hoping to proceed transparency.
So you're talking about transparency in contracts. Is there any other transparency that you wish, or? I mean, that makes sense to me, but it's just been mentioned so many times. I just want to make sure I understand.
Any way that we can increase transparency, I think it's always for the benefit of the village.
Okay.
That the openness of the debate, and I think, again, making it a situation where people feel welcome, that they want to come, that they are not afraid to ask questions. That would be an important part of making all of the operation more transparent.
Well, I think so far this evening, people are asking questions, and they're asking good questions that are, some of them are hard and directed squarely at the current incumbent village council members.
And Maria, I would
can
say,
squirm a little bit.
I agree with you. Transparency is one of those 50-cent big words. I mean, what does transparency mean to you? So I would say to you all, what do you want? What do you want? Clear communication? You want to see a breakdown? This is
right, because contracts are important,
right?
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Sherrod, Chestnut Street. You know, I know that we have a roving policeman, but I never hear of any issues regarding safety or any devious happenings in the neighborhood. It may be on listserv, I don't know, but I certainly don't see anything in our
Well, we don't have a lot of devious things happening in our neighborhood, and I thank the good heavens for that.
That's fine then. I mean, you know. But
Pardon?
I say that's great, but.
Then you're saying, why should we have police? To prevent anything bad from happening, to discourage and to establish a presence, and to also establish a police presence that integrates with the Chevy Chase Village Police Force, the town of Chevy Chase Police Force, and the police force at Chevy Chase View. And I think that having a broad police protection system set up like that does protect us. We get more for our little, and it's a very minuscule contribution. It's not enough to do anything, but it participates, and it does have a deterrent effect on people who come through. We have a lot of construction projects going on here. We have people coming through who are strangers. It is something that it's worth having a police protection for. And the police officers do go around, they do visit these construction sites, and it does have an impact.
And also, as John said earlier, we'd be the only community right around here that didn't have police, making us a target.
I'll just say something.
Hi, my name's Peter Ross. I live on Raymond Street for 23 years now. We've all seen national voter surveys where voters expressed broad dissatisfaction with government institutions that they described as too bureaucratic, indifferent, or even adversarial to individuals who come before them, and better at aggregating power than being responsive to constituents. We're lucky to live in this pretty idyllic little community where, with our own small village government, we would think that would be easy to avoid and not so likely to happen. But my question is twofold. Would you be concerned if there were more than a few residents who actually felt some of those kind of big government frustrations in their dealings with our village government? And second, do you believe that in fact there are more than a few village residents who feel that way?
My sense is that I would be concerned over any village resident who feels that they are being mistreated or ignored or not paid attention to by the village government. This community is too small to push aside anybody in that way. Do these things happen by rumor? Because no one has spoken to me directly about that. And I would
Well, I felt that way. I felt that way last year, and that's why I'm running. I felt that way, but I did learn from my experience. There are things that are not in the realm of Village of Martin's Addition that we residents need to be made aware of, that fall more under the county authority. And
Mr. Fleming, I understood from your earlier comments and now, it sounds like no one's brought that to your attention in a way that you believe that there are such dissatisfaction.
Well, it's been brought to my attention just now.
This is the first you've heard.
It's not the first I've heard. There have been some anonymous things on my email, unsigned, that have complained bitterly about what they see going on in the village. It's very generic. It's very ethereal. There's nothing specific.
Others?
All I can say is that, yes, there are people who are upset.
I think everyone who has a complaint needs to be heard. And I hate to belabor the point about transparency. This is a good definition, what John is describing, about lack of transparency. I think it starts with the fact that our community doesn't know who to come to on the council. It's very difficult and intimidating for somebody who might have a complaint to know what to do about it. We could do a better job, the council can do a better job communicating a process. I don't want to make this overly bureaucratic, but I think the council and the manager and the relationship that exists today could be improved by being much more open and clear about, on certain topics, how the community should engage with us. And again, my point earlier, every council member should have an area of responsibility. Those where complaints or good ideas or policy changes come, it's almost like a subcommittee. Council then considers all of that. To me, that's transparency.
Do you believe
I would also like to say one thing, which is that...
I'm sorry, I wanted to hear from the other candidates.
Go ahead.
Sorry, what was your follow-up?
It was just twofold. You were explaining that you would be concerned if there was. Do you believe there is such dissatisfaction amongst the residents?
I've heard there is, sure, but I can't sit here and tell you what it is because I'm not on council. So.
Others?
I certainly heard it while I was on the council, and after I left the council were people who would call and particularly talk about the way they were treated, but ask that there be no follow-up on it because they were afraid. And that's really unfortunate.
I don't understand.
That's so cloak and dagger.
I know.
It is cloak and dagger, but it's...
Well, it's very, very difficult when people ask for privacy because they are afraid. Then you respect their privacy.
What are they afraid of?
The question was back here, I'm sorry, right, I think retaliation, either from the council or from the staff.
This is America. We don't retaliate.
What are they going to do, take away your trash can? Seriously. You're like the nicest people in the world.
Much to do about it.
Could I have another question, please? Anybody else?
Did you want the rest of the...
Yeah, I was hoping I could hear.
Yes.
Althea Harlan, Raymond Street. I've heard a few people stand up and mention that they have not had responsiveness for up to a year's time on things that they raised with the council or had a question about. So I'm frankly surprised that anyone sitting on the council would say today that there's no dissatisfaction that they know of and that there are no issues in the community. That's very surprising to me.
Any comments? Okay. Ernie?
Another dissatisfaction.
Sorry.
Could you stand, please, Ernie?
My name is Ernie
Liebman. I spoke.
Just because this is being recorded.
When are our streets going to be paved? We've got these potholes, and now they're being covered up.
When the utility work is done, when they stop tearing up our
Do you have any
streets.
fix on when that might happen?
I have none.
Can I add, can I let you know, because you were one of the first people who brought to my attention how bad the potholes are. I'm going to present, the council actually has in its packet a proposal from, regarding repairing the potholes. They've all gone out to a contractor. Well, let me...
Gene, would you mind, can we make that part of the 30 regular session? Start with that?
Yeah, just so you know, we got it working.
No, I'm thinking about...
So let's pick that up.
This is a good topic, I think, for the general meeting, which will follow in 15 or 20 minutes, unless you all want to quit now.
We basically have several questions that come in on these cards. And if anyone else wants to put questions in, now's the time to do it because we're running short. I'm going to ask my colleague here to pick a number and read the question.
Joker.
Steve? Steve?
All right.
Do you want that microphone?
Yeah, sure.
I was remarking earlier that my mother had the best penmanship in the world until I read this card. Whoever wrote this has wonderful penmanship. Okay, I'm just reading the question from the crowd. Jean's decision to hire her daughter raises some questions. Who verifies that employees' hours and pay? Who approved that hiring decision? It's not directed to anybody in particular.
I think the chairman of the council can do that.
I'm not ready.
Well, you're the candidate.
But I will. I can address that very briefly. There was a position open notice that was circulated widely. There were a few candidates who applied that were not up to par. Beth did apply, and she did have experience in working for a local municipality, as well as filling in here at the office. And she got the job at that time. We would like to reopen that for a fuller, more vigorous search. But she has done a nice job while she's been here. But I recognize that there are these kinds of issues out there.
All right, I have unless there's a follow-up question, I have another question from the hat. These are to all candidates, and maybe what we can do is either go Mark that way or Katie that way. Katie, because I like to go left to right. My left to right. Why are you running, and what would you like to change? So I'll stop there. That's the question.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Sounds like a lot. I mean, I never had to address your question, which is, I've heard what you're saying, I felt what you're saying, and it's time to do something about it. I think it's good to get new perspective on the council. With new perspective, you get new ideas, and while everyone up here brings something to the table, literally, and has excellent background and experience. There's ideas I applaud. I like Mark's idea of the committees. That's my platform in the way as well. I think there just needs to be better residential relations, and my whole platform is building. I mean, I'm pro-building. I support a resident's desire to enhance and build upon their house, but there's just this disrespect and civility that's just, or lack of civility, I should say, that's just running rampant, and it's just going to happen more. And I think, my vantage point, my experience would help on this, council.
I don't have a Bill's hourglass, but that was a good timing, succinct.
The question was, why are we running for...
feeling like a wrap-up or a final
Right.
statement. There was nothing. We just picked a random question, but
Right.
go ahead.
I'm running for council because I'm really interested in the street lights and the process that we used in doing the building codes, and I think that is a good experience, and I'd like to see us do that again, in addition to wanting to support the community. And I think that in terms of change, well, I just go back to, I think that we can be more open and we can make sure that everyone's comfortable so that their voice is heard.
Gotcha.
I, to a certain degree, we've discussed this already, but I'm running because I love our village. I would love to do the best for the village, and I would like to dedicate my time and energy to the village council to use my experience in the upcoming 2 years. And what would I change? I really believe that we deserve better communications in the village. We can do better. Maybe surveys would be great to get village residents' feedback for what services they're interested in, or what is working, what is not working. And so accountability, transparency, and respect are our three things that I would like to work on.
John?
Well, I'm running because I feel that we have a strong village government and a strong village management. And this is not something that you knock over easily and think that you can rebuild and have function as well as it is functioning. And I have to say that the criticisms have been well taken, and they're worth listening to, and they're worth responding to. But I don't think that responding to community complaints, and I categorize them as community complaints, really rises to the issue of throwing everything over that has been built and that we're involved in running in the present time. And so that, yes, I am a voice for current management.
Bill?
I've worked in state, local, and federal government. I believe in government. I believe that we need to reach out to the other jurisdictions and to the county and perhaps to the state to resolve some of our larger problems that are beyond our resources, such as the stormwater. And I share John's opinion about the government, our government, and it could be better, it should be better, will be better.
Mark?
I think our village is a wonderful place. I think it's a small place. I'm running to ensure that we keep a balance between all those things I mentioned earlier: fiscal stability, preservation of our property values, consistent delivery of services, and so on. I think it's important. I'm gonna get a little piece of paper. I'm gonna take all of the things I mentioned earlier in my statement. I'm going to laminate them, and I'm going to make sure that if I'm on council, we all refer to that consistently, because the voice of the community is key. I believe that there's a voice of people who aren't in this room we have to go out and seek, but it's always about ensuring the balance. I agree with the statements earlier. I don't think it's broken. I think our village is really well run. I think there's obviously things we can do better. And that's what I'm going to bring my years of corporate experience to the council and ensure that we do that.
One more?
Well, we have 10 minutes left, roughly, before this ends, and I have some more written questions here, and I will read it off. This one's a blank.
That's easy to do. John, you want to take a crack at that one?
I think you can hear me all. This is addressed again to all candidates. Will you commit to a thorough review and audit independent. Of all current VMA contracts, we have quite a few no-bid contracts. If we could go from the other way, starting with Mark now and ending up with Katie.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much of our time. I believe we answered that earlier. I believe that there needs to be a threshold, and we have to ensure that through our committee structure, we're diving deep into questions the community has. So even below that threshold, if there are concerns and questions, there should be no secrets. There should be no question that through some process we shouldn't be able to answer on behalf of the community.
I think that's our primary responsibility, is to have honest contracting, visible to everybody.
I endorse that view. I don't know what else you can say, and I happen to believe that's what we're doing, quite frankly.
I would commit to an audit of our contracts.
I would too. I think that it's important they all be reviewed and that people understand, that the residents understand who we have contracts with and why. Because it seems to be a big issue.
Well, your question is 6 for 6. Yes, I absolutely agree.
I have a question. Would the council be doing that review
The name.
of all the contracts?
Did you
No?
want to identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Alex Weiner from Thornapple Street, and I'd just like to know this review of all contracts are you guys, as council members, going to sit down and review all the contracts? Is that what you-
My understanding is that we would be aware of all of the contracts, and if in fact the council decides that they want to review them, they would. But at least they would, at least they would know what's in the contracts.
Richard, in your time as chairman, you were aware of all contracts.
I knew pretty much all of them except a couple. Yep.
Well,
and
what about those couple?
Well, I tried.
I think there has to be a professional review, qualified accountant, CPA, and the council.
One final question here. As a council member, would you support a confidential survey of all village residents about issues, concerns, and performance? And how would you go about doing that? And let's start in the middle.
I would support a confidential survey. We need to get feedback from all the village residents.
And how would you go about doing that?
Send out a survey to village residents and get their feedback. I'm not sure I follow that question.
I mean, obviously you get in touch with all the residents, but how would the survey be constructed? Who would do it? How do you see it happening?
So the council would agree on what questions should be in the survey, and then they would be sent out to village residents for response. We would aggregate responses, and based on that, I would presume that would feed into the performance
So
review.
just to clarify, the council would meet together to develop the survey.
Of course. So I think it's pretty standard practice to get a 360 review for most corporate employees. I don't see how this is different.
Thank you. Richard?
I agree that it would be through a council. You know, the council would certainly be the ones that would make the final decisions. But I think it's also an opportunity to have the residents, try to find out what the concerns are so that the survey actually addresses those. I think that one of the difficulties with surveys is, like, people have talked about using Monkey. I'm not real up on all of this. Pardon?
Survey monkey.
What is it?
Survey Monkey.
Survey Monkey. Okay. But that if you use different computers, you can keep putting in results. And so there's a way apparently where you could send multiple answers. So I think we'd have to consider how you would do that. and both maintain.
And you have a lot of older residents that don't.
Yeah, we need hard copies
Right.
too.
You know.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Bill?
I think surveys are a feel-good idea. I think you need a person who understands how to evaluate them as part of the process, not just 6 non-professionals evaluating what they mean.
Katie.
Well, why don't we finish the round?
We're finishing this question, which was submitted by a resident, not by myself. Katie, please.
Katie, sure. Surveys are the way to go. As for the method, I mean, yeah, I like to stay more green. I mean, I don't know about, a door-to-door survey, but SurveyMonkey is an interesting way too. We could email out a survey and have people anonymously drop them off. Or for the council members, I'm with you. I run the streets of the Village of Martin's Addition. Maybe we could divvy up the streets and go door to door and hear what you have to say, the old-fashioned way. I remember when Doug Gansler and Chris Van Hollen came to 35 Taylor Street. That's why I continue to vote for them, because they showed up at my door and they listened to me. So you could do the anonymous paper, or we could come to your house and listen to you, if we're walking the streets anyway. So.
That would be faster than.
Yes, I believe we need to do an annual survey. Yes, we need to do an annual survey. The survey, unlike what I think I heard some people say, it's not about our manager's performance alone. It is about everything to do with this village. It is important that we collect feedback on the council, on our governance style, on the way in which the council communicates, as well as the delivery of services. I think in terms of how we do it, I think it's important that we have multiple ways in which people can be surveyed. The key is to get as much of a response rate as possible. I would recommend that we, using some of our surplus, hire a professional firm to conduct that. It might be a phone survey, and the anonymity would be maintained by that professional organization, so if people weren't reached on the phone, we could follow up with Monkey, or we could follow up with a paper survey. Response rate is key.
Survey Monkey.
John, you haven't answered yet.
I'm not against surveys. I don't think that they answer the questions that a council would have to address and would have to deal with. I don't think that there are hidden issues in the community, and I do feel that the most effective means is direct communication, either written or verbal, oral, meeting, talking to people. That is the way in which you get a sense of what the community is all about. And then finally, there is elections, and people do need to vote. And it's voting is when you really get to express what your opinion is, yes or no. And I think, to my mind, that's the most critical thing. I would say that's more important than having a survey, an anonymous survey of people, because voting is anonymous and it's a secret ballot, but there is a public result.
Bill, do you want to?
John McDonald, Summit Avenue. How many contracts over $10,000 are there? And second part, are there many between $5,000 and $10,000?
That's the chairman to answer.
That's the manager. It's the manager's job. There are a small handful over 10,000, like the garbage, the waste pickup. There aren't a lot. Let me invite everybody to stay to the council meeting afterwards. We are going to be discussing, among other things, a contractor too. So if you want some transparency, don't go home. Stay. Participate in your local government.
So, yeah, and to Mark's point, we live in Washington. I don't know where we're going to find a polling company.
We're out of time. Thank you very much, everybody. Please stay if you want to. The general meeting will begin promptly.
Can I make one point? You guys, many of you probably saw my email from last night. I really do mean it. I'd love to have half. If we get half the village to vote, that means I can claim some sort of moral victory of some sort. But I think we should all thank the 6 people up here who are volunteers, who are, if they win, willing to dedicate a lot of their time and a lot of their energy. In addition to Arthur and I don't see Tiffany Cisna and Josh Bowers, at the very least we should give a big round of applause. So.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. And we are going to go into a general session. Everybody is invited to stay and hear what actually goes on, get some transparency. Thank you for rushing back from Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't get a ticket.
We have.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited. At the beach. Yeah.
Will it be easier if I pull it in?
Bill is trying to hold the chair. Thank you.
A couple of years ago, but it really never worked out because I ended up traveling a lot. So I wasn't able to do it. My job's different now.
Oh, no, there was another one. And it was 1 by 1 vote.
Yes.
That's right.
I'm going to talk to this guy.